Farm, fur, and fish. The Imperial Senate has commissioned Graciana y Lopez y Guerra to appraise ways to take increase in the prosperity of Semisark, its people, and potentially the entire empire. Before heading to the northeasternmost part of the empire, Graciana spends a few days in Tacito, visiting the Imperial Mint. While her contacts there refuse to go into much detail, she clearly comes away with food for thought. At least on paper, there's no reason to consider Semisark is failing to pay its own way. Even with citizens returning to the territory and recent developments such as the new roads, the Northern Territory already pays a significant amount into the Imperial Treasury in taxation. There are a lot of valuable farms and businesses there, and while the impact of the Jotun invasion is still being felt, Semisark is rapidly returning to the prosperity it enjoyed before the orcs came. Semisark's wealth lies in the beasts of the cold plains, in the herbs and forests, and in the fish that throng in the great freshwater lakes that dot the territory. Years of being under the life-giving and life-affirming power of the Rivers of Life curse has seen the populations of animals and plants in the territory expand to almost dangerous levels. The hunters, fishers, and trappers who once fled before the Jotun advance have returned. The mammoth herds are as healthy as ever. The last remnant of orc occupation has pretty much run its course. With that in mind, Graciana chooses to approach the problem from a different direction. Unsurprising for a prognosticator who favours novel approaches to problems she is asked to appraise. Sadly, she might not be the best person to send to a purely economic appraisal. Her plans are often made with scant regard to the expense involved. Trade negotiations. Semisark could establish trade routes with the orcs of Octodov and Skarsind, but the challenges that must first be resolved are beyond the prognosticator's remit. Graciana presents two theoretical proposals that involve arranging for the people of Semisark to engage in trade with their neighbours to the north and to the east. But there are obstacles that need to be overcome first. Diplomatic relations with Octodov are on a knife edge at the moment, and the collapse of Pakanan's Pass limits possibilities to trade with the orcs of Skarsind. Pakanan's Pass. Reopening Pakanan's Pass would allow trade between Semisark and Skarsind to the benefit of both territories. Pakanan's Pass used to allow passage between Semisark and Skarsind. Caravans once passed regularly in both directions, both when the latter territory was part of Wintermark and later when it was gifted to the Imperial Orcs. In later 383 YE, a Jotun Yagara force under the walrus banner of Isa Winterborn sealed the western end of the pass. Until the pass is cleared, it's unusable by Imperial armies. It's also impassable to merchant caravans, which is unfortunate. As Skarsind has grown in size and prosperity, easy trade with their neighbours to the west could be good for both territories. The Imperial Orcs have plenty of valuable wood and metal, but they'd also value meat, fish, fowl, herbs, furs, ivory, all things Semisark provides in abundance. Reopening Pakanan's Pass would be a fairly major undertaking, and while Graciana has a few ideas of how it might be done, it's also beyond the remit of her immediate appraisal. She suggests that if the Imperial Senate wish to pursue this avenue, that they consider another appraisal specifically to reopen the pass, and if they specify that they want it opened both for military and merchant purposes, that might provide opportunities to increase both the prosperity of both Wintermark and the Imperial Orcs. Northern Neighbours. Warlock Askia of Volham asks for the Thule to hunt in East Flows. A Senate motion could grant citizens of Ottogov the right indefinitely, or for a set amount of time. The Warlocks of Volham have offered to endow 10 mana crystals a season to a Conclave order for as long as they have hunting rights. And on the subject of trading with orcs, shortly before the winter solstice 384 YE, Askia of Volham came to the Empire on behalf of the Thule Dragons with 2 requests. The trading hall at Rek was built, and both mediators of Rek who have served in the year since it was established, Arya Friskdottir and Halvind Breingold, have consistently arranged caravans piled with food to be sent north. The other thing the Thule asked was to be allowed to hunt in Suak Font and East Flows, and they were prepared to offer Ilium for the right to do so. Ilium that could be used for any number of reasons. Now that the ambassador to Oktkodov is a citizen of Wintermark, there may be value in approaching the northern orcs about this offer. They are unlikely to be prepared to offer as much as Ilium. There's a suggestion that the immediate threat of wide-scale starvation has passed, not least thanks to the food caravans provided by the mediators of the Rek, but the Thule have other things that might prove valuable to the people of Summersark. The Silver Peaks alone are rich in both Welt Silver and Tempest Jade, for example, and the orcs of Otkadov are clearly not short of mana or vis. The people of Summersark are in an excellent position to trade profitably and prosperously with the Thule if they are prepared to seize the opportunity. One way to do that might be to relocate the Thule embassy from its current location in Miradia to Summersark. It is significantly easier for the orcs of Otkadov to reach Suak Front and East Flows, both in the shadow of the Silver Peaks, than it is the frozen vale of Wendell's Hope. Graciana believes that with the Thule approval, the embassy could be moved with a single Senate motion and commission. Unlike her colleague Naomi, Graciana is not a great diplomat, but she is confident that with the right approach it will be possible to negotiate a trade ministry specifically to exchange the bounty of Summersark, furs, ivory, meat, and so on, for valuable Thule vis or raw materials. Obviously, the ongoing delicate situation with the Thule would need to be resolved first, but Graciana considers that a minor detail. Taking the waters. The hot springs of Taniki represent a minor wonder of the Empire, and Graciana proposes ways that they might be curated to improve the prosperity of Summersark. She presents plans for a garden harnessing the heat of the springs, and a hostel that will draw in travellers keen to experience the lagoon's effects. Graciana has laid out some proposals for commissions that would improve the prosperity of the people of Summersark and allow them to support or trade with their imperial allies. While touring the territory, Graciana is especially taken by the possibilities presented by the hot springs of Taniki, a natural lagoon of heated water that bubbles up in Tankipari. Herbs and hot springs. Graciana proposes harnessing the heat created by the hot springs of Taniki to establish a garden specializing in growing cerulean mazarine. One of the obstacles the herbalists of Wintermark, the Imperial Orcs, and Varushka must contend with is the difficulty of getting cerulean mazarine, a plant that favors warmer climates, to flourish in the colder weather common to the north. In places, the spring water is just shy of boiling, and the lake itself is full of strange mineral goodness. After talking with some local residents, Graciana has a couple of proposals and seems quite enthused by the possibilities presented by the steaming lake. Most straightforward, she proposes the construction of the Gardens of Taniki. This would be a herb garden established on and around the southern shores of the lake, taking advantage of the heat generated naturally by the waters to help the plant, also known as sanguine hibiscus, to propagate in the otherwise hostile conditions. Through careful use of the rune bravache, the gardeners here would be able to raise a sizable stock of the valuable plant used to both repair wrecked limbs, treat serious injuries, and brew all kinds of useful potions. A straightforward sinecure, it would create the title of Gardener of Bravache, who would be responsible for overseeing the garden and receive a bounty of 27 grams of cerulean mazarine each season. Hostel and hot water. A hostel catering to the people who wish to bathe in the waters of the lagoon would bring in travellers and help establish new businesses in Taniki. The hot springs serve as a stopping-off point for those who have made the decision to walk to Sidania, treading in the footsteps of Empress Marikia. Mystics and seers from Wintermark and beyond often visit here as well. The waters are said to have properties that aid divination and scrying magic of all kinds. While pondering this, Graciana also considers the Reaper's Repose in Temeshwar, a lodge where rich guests spend time away from the demands of the world. Graciana proposes a hall, providing restful surroundings and enabling visitors from all over the Empire to bathe in the hot springs. The waters are relaxing and have some beneficial effects to those suffering certain kinds of lingering pain conditions. Those who meditate while bathing sometimes speak of gaining a degree of clarity about their own lives and leave with new goals or new understanding of their place in the world. The land itself is surprisingly beautiful, stark and wild and inspirational. All this combines to propose something that would bring more travelers to Sermasak and help contribute to the prosperity of the people. The Hot Springs Hall would be built on the northern shores. Guests would stay in rich surroundings and split their time between bathing in the waters and exploring the beautiful surrounds. It would create a title, Thane of Hot Springs Hall, who would look after the hall and the guests. It would provide a regular income for the Thane, 2 thrones each season, but the Thane would also receive 2 vials of prepared lake water each season. Held in specially made vials, the water is drawn from the springs near the Dei Regio on its northern shores, and represents a consumable that provides benefits to those performing divination magic. Usually the waters must be taken directly from the lagoon, and their properties are unpredictable, but there are few ice walkers who know how to seal and stabilize their power with special seals. Using the rune Hermok. The hall would not only bring guests, but also people who would support the lodge and its visitors. It would see a significant burst of prosperity in Tanakpari, with a number of new businesses established, and likely a new town that would spring up near the springs. It would not be especially dramatic, but Graciana predicts it would increase the taxation from Sermasak by 2 thrones each season. Farm, fur, and fish. Graciana believes the real wealth of Sermasak lies in its beasts and plants, in hunters, farmers, and fisherfolk. The wealth of Sermasak lies in the animals and plants that flourish there. Caribou, deer, bear, wolves, seals, mammoths, penguins, puffins, whales with horns, snow lions, Arctic foxes and hares, large Arctic foxes and hares, walruses, very big walruses, dangerous flightless birds. There is a vast profusion of different beasts here. Meat, ivory, leather, hide, fur, and more are gathered by the hunters of Sermasak. Many of the plants that grow on the tundra are edible, exotic enough that their roots and berries are in demand by chefs and all those with refined palates. The lakes throng with fish, some not encountered anywhere else. These natural resources are ripe for exploitation. Ice water fish. A fishery built at the town of Atalak would support farms and fisherfolk across the territory. It would also further cement relations with the Heliae of the lakes. Atalak is the oldest settlement in the territory, the spiritual heart of the Suak tradition. Since time immemorial, fisherfolk have plied their trade on the frigid lakes. Graciana proposes to harness that tradition by establishing a fishery at Atalak. This would provide all kinds of services to those whose livelihood depends on the fresh lake waters. It would further increase the profitability of farms throughout the territory, directly to those farms that represent fisherfolk. Graciana is no diplomat, but she is aware that Sermasak is not only home to the winterfolk, but also the cousins of the Suak, the Heliae. After spending a few days at the Heliae Hole, she believes that the fisheries could also be used to increase understanding and harmony between the Empire and the Seal Shifters. In return for basic concessions and the division of the fishing rights on the lake, the Heliae would provide mana crystal from the depths of the lakes to their land-bound cousins. Similar to the rich bounty of the Heliae Hole, any farm in Sermasak would be able to use a single diversification option to reduce the income of their farm by 36 rings, but in its place gain a single mana crystal each season representing negotiation with the Hyliae. The cost of diversification has a throne and can be done only once per farm. There are additional benefits from the fishery if the Senate creates a mediator of Attalak, as we will shortly discover. Fur and ivory. A grand trading post in southern Sermasak would provide a significant boost to businesses in the territory. It would provide additional benefits to Wintermark's ships trading with foreign ports by providing rich luxury goods to sell. The custodian of the bloody great sausage would be in prime condition to make a profit from the increased availability of fine exotic meats. Sermasak provides fur, ivory and leather as well as meat found nowhere else in the Empire. While a lot of that meat is currently going north, there's also demand across the Empire. Graciana proposes that the Imperial Senate could construct a trading post at Attalak. While the trading hall at Rek focuses on trade with the Thule, the trading hall at Attalak would focus on trade with, well, everyone else. The hall would serve as a great work that added 36 rings to every business in the territory. It would also draw a significant number of merchants from imperial territories, as well as encouraging more people to go into business for themselves, and that would increase taxation on the territory by 4 thrones each season going forward. The great work would have other impacts as well. The burst of luxury goods and materials the trade post provided would have a benefit for the traders and merchants of Wintermark as well. For a full year after the post was completed, every fleet operated from a Wintermark territory would receive a bonus income of 36 rings whenever they engaged in trade with foreign nations. Selling ivory and fur to people who appreciate the fine quality of the materials gathered by the hunters of Sermasak. The meat of exotic creatures such as mammoths, the rare plants that grow on the tundra, would be very much in demand by connoisseurs and gourmands across the Empire. Once complete, it would provide an opportunity for the custodian of the bloody great sausage to negotiate favourable access to the produce of Sermasak and bring it to the cities of the League. The custodian would gain an income of 7 crowns each season in profits, and the occasional bribe. There would be additional benefits if the Senate also chose to establish a mediator of Attalak. Mediator of Attalak. If the Senate commissions either the fisheries of Attalak or the Attalak Trading Hall, they can also establish a mediator of Attalak. The mediator could influence the hunters and fishers of Sermasak to change the benefits provided by great works in the territory. If the Senate commissions either the fisheries of Atalau or the Attalak Trader Hall, they could take the opportunity to create the title Mediator of Attalak as part of the same motion. They could also create the title independently with a Senate motion if they wished, by amending the Smokehouse of Attalak to give the mediator responsibility for it. However it was created, the mediator would be responsible for the smokehouse and any of the fisheries or trade hall that were created. Appointed by the tally of the votes, the mediator would work with the hunters of Sermasak, negotiate with traders keen to acquire valuable goods from them, and offer guidance. They would take responsibility for protecting the smokehouse, but also gain the ability to propose that the hunters and herders of Sermasak adopt different priorities. Once each season, they would be able to adjust the benefits of the smokehouse of Attalak. By persuading hunters to focus on culling the mammoth herds, they would change the benefits of the great work from additional rinks to provide each farm in the territory with 72 fewer rings, but in their place they would receive a mammoth blood salve each season. This red salve, made from mammoth blood and fat, grants health and strength to warriors, allowing them to survive savage blows in combat. If the fisheries mentioned above were built, it would also be the responsibility of the mediator to protect and maintain them. They would gain the benefit to focus the efforts on the fisherfolk, rather than the hunters. If they did this, the great work would provide 72 fewer rings, but each farm in the territory would instead produce a flask of moonfish oil each season. This powerful aromatic oil greatly replenishes the magical reserves of magicians and is valuable to battle mages and war healers alike. the mediator would use the ability to change the effect of the great work with an email to the plot team after an event, but before downtime closes. The change to the benefits of the great work would apply from that downtime onward until changed again. In theory, there might be future opportunities to add additional rare plants, animal products, or fish to those available to the mediator. Paying our way. If the people of Sermasak are concerned about their contribution to the wider empire, Graciana has some proposals. They include significant boosts to the imperial treasury by decommissioning the Jotun forts, or relinquishing the pride of Ika's tiers. Even if they don't want to take these options, she's also pointed out the value of establishing the beacons of Wintermark in the territory. Graciana has laid out several ways that Sermasak could support the wider empire, mostly by providing more money to the imperial treasury, which can then be used on projects important to other nations. Extraneous castles. The fortress of Kalant and Oglafstossis Hall requires constant upkeep by the imperial treasury. They might be replaced with a set of beacons similar to those used in Hanmark and Kalvasea. The first adjustment to the balance sheet Graciana proposes is purely mathematical. Every territory incurs costs to the imperial treasury. One of the largest costs comes in the money required to upkeep fortifications. Since they were built by the Jotun, the fortress of Kalant and Oglafstossis Hall between them cost the Empire 36 thrones each season, which soon adds up and cuts deeply into whatever revenue Sermasak creates. If the Senate were to decommission one or both of these massive, costly castles, that would significantly increase Sermasak's contribution to the treasury. A single Senate motion could then be used to decommission both castles. Technically, all castles in Sermasak, but only 2 are under imperial control, so the matter is moot. They would not immediately fall down, but quickly deteriorate. But there will be a small window for the Senate to recommission one or both of them if they regretted their decision. Out of character note. They would offer no benefit to the defense of Sermasak and would lose 500 force every season until they were no longer considered fortifications, but their decline could be halted at any point by using the Senate motion to recommission them and begin paying their upkeep again. Leaving Sermasak defenseless would obviously be short-sighted, but there are no fortifications in Hanmark or Kalvasea either. Rather, the Winterfolk rely on their heroes to protect them in times of need, both through their armies and through the networks of beacon towers. By all accounts, the beacons have demonstrated their value in the fight against Cold Sun. The obvious thing to do would be to extend that same creation to Sermasak. They'd take a little while to build and require some investment, but once complete would provide the same benefits as those in the southern territories. They would provide a warning of invasion, meaning an attack would never count as uncontested, allow military units led by Wintermark heroes to defend them just as if they were a fortification, be maintained and garrisoned by the Sermasak halls, meaning no drain on the imperial treasury, but not count as a fortification for purposes of rituals except by those specifically designed to target the beacons, remain operational and take no damage as long as Atalark in Sealtok remains in imperial hands. As mentioned when the beacons were first proposed, creating the beacons is a slightly more daunting proposition in Sermasak than it was in Kalvasea and Hanmark. But, says Graciana, the advantages of not having an upkeep to the imperial treasury and allowing the self-sufficient hunters of Sermasak to defend their own prosperity are self-evident. Pride and Tears. The mithril mine Pride of Ika's Tears imposes cost on the imperial treasury, but provides no income. It could be relinquished and made an imperial bourse seat. One of the sources of Sermasak's wealth is the Pride of Ika's Tears, the mithril mine discovered by chance nearly 7 years ago. The Imperial Senate pays a steep price to open the workings and then further invested in both expanding the mine workings and improving access to the northern part of the territory. The mine now produces a hefty 22 wains of mithril each season. It's also a drain on the Imperial Treasury. The Senate pays its upkeep, but it is a national resource assigned by the tally of the votes. Graciana points out that Tuija Dunning, who currently holds the seat, is surely a prosperous individual, but it does little to help Sermersark pay its own way. 5 years ago, the Senate created the power of relinquishment. It requires a constitutional vote to pass, and could be vetoed not only by the usual assemblies but also by the Wintermark Assembly. It would require ratification, of course, but the Empire has a throne once again, so that should presumably be no obstacle. The closest equivalent, the Great Mine of Briante and Karaman, has brought in over 400 thrones each year for the past 3 years. If the Pride of Icar's Tears brought in a comparable amount of mithril, it would be a dramatic increase to Sermersark's and Wintermark's contribution to the Empire. This would obviously leave Wintermark without an easy supply of mithril. Graciana suggests that it might be possible to revisit the old proposal for Gulnar's Deep Hall in Hammark, although that is beyond the rope of her appraisal, and anyway, might not be in the best interests of the Reeves of Boar's Market or the Bargainer of the Iron Tower. There are only so many wains of mithril dug up by miners and prospectors to go around, after all. Graciana is aware that the Imperial Conclave has paid Estravus to review the Pride of Icar's Tears, but is confident that whatever the Eternal proposes will be as relevant to an Imperial position as a national one.